In the dusty, sun-scorched town of Rowan's Bend, life moved slowly for most of the people. The town was a place where folks came and went, looking for a fresh start, a chance to make their fortune, or just a place to escape their past. There was only one saloon in town, and it stood at the edge of Main Street, the center of everything. A rickety wooden building with a porch that creaked in the wind. The saloon was where the town's business happened, for better or worse. And inside everyone gathered, cowboys, travelers, outlaws, and traders, all looking for a good drink, a friendly game of cards, or simply a place to pass the time. Jack Callahan, a tall and lean cowboy with a weathered face and a reputation for being quick with a gun, sat at the bar nursing a glass of whiskey. He'd been on the road for weeks, moving from town to town, never staying long enough to make any real connections. His job was simple: work the land, work the cattle, and if trouble came, deal with it. He wasn't looking for anything more, but tonight something felt different. There was a buzz in the air. Jack could feel it as soon as he walked into the saloon. The traders had gathered in one corner, their laughter loud and brash. They were always boasting, always looking for ways to make themselves seem important. Tonight, though, their conversation seemed to be a little more lively than usual. Jack took a slow sip of his whiskey and leaned back in his chair, half listening. The traders had been in Rowan's Bend for a few days, and Jack had heard enough of their stories about their travels, their trades, and their supposed conquests. But tonight their voices were louder, filled with an edge of excitement. Then one of them stood up, a bulky man with a thick beard and a thick accent. He slapped the table with his palm and called out, "Hey, I bet y'all $100 Jack Callahan wouldn't last an hour with a Cheyenne woman." The room fell quiet. Jack raised an eyebrow. The traders had been talking all evening about their experiences with native women, making jokes about how easily they could tame them, or how they had taught them how to behave. It was all a game to them, a way to make themselves feel important. Jack didn't like what he was hearing, but he wasn't about to back down from a bet, especially not one that challenged his pride. With a half smirk, he stood up and adjusted his coat. "You're on," he said, his voice low but firm. He was known for being a man who could handle anything, and he wasn't about to let these loudmouths think they had one over on him. The traders laughed, and one of them went to the door, calling out to someone outside. Moments later, a young woman walked into the saloon. She was tall, her dark hair flowing like a river of night, and her face was strong, framed by high cheekbones and intense eyes that seemed to pierce right through the room. She was dressed in simple clothes, but there was something about her that stood out. Something wild, untamed. Her name was Kimi, and she was Cheyenne. The traders, who had expected a woman who would cower and act meek, looked at each other, surprised by her strength. They'd brought her into the saloon as part of their joke, thinking she would be nothing more than a simple prize for Jack to deal with. They had no idea who they were dealing with. Kimi walked across the room, her steps measured and sure. She didn't look nervous or afraid. In fact, she looked completely at ease, her eyes scanning the room with a calmness that was almost unsettling. The saloon seemed to hold its breath as she approached Jack. Jack couldn't help but notice her. There was something about her, the way she held herself, the way her eyes never looked away from him. Most women Jack had known would have either tried to shy away from him or acted nervous in such a situation. But not Kimi. There was no fear in her, only quiet confidence. She stopped in front of him, her gaze never leaving his, and for a moment there was silence. The traders watched, waiting to see how Jack would respond. Would he try to impress her? Would he treat her like a prize to be won? But Jack wasn't like the other men in the room. He didn't look at Kimi as something to be conquered. He wasn't interested in making a show of himself, not with her. He simply studied her, intrigued by her calmness, her presence. She wasn't like the women he'd met before. She was something different, something he didn't fully understand but wanted to. Then Kimi spoke. Her voice was soft but strong, carrying through the room. She leaned close to Jack, her breath warm against his ear. "I am not a joke," she whispered, her words cutting through the tension in the air. "But you might be the one to learn something tonight." Jack felt a jolt run through him at her words. His heart skipped a beat, and for a moment everything else in the saloon disappeared. The laughter of the traders, the sounds of clinking glasses, the low hum of conversations. It all faded away. All that remained was Kimi and the fire in her eyes. Her words weren't just a challenge. They were a promise. The traders didn't notice the shift in the room. They were still laughing, still placing their bets and talking among themselves. But for Jack, everything had changed in that moment. He had expected to play along with the joke, to show the traders he wasn't afraid of any woman they brought in. But now he wasn't so sure. Kimmy wasn't just a woman to be won or conquered. She was someone who would not be controlled, someone who might change the way he saw the world. As the night wore on, Jack found himself lost in thought, his mind replaying her words. What had she meant by them? What had she meant by saying he might be the one to learn something tonight? He didn't know, but he wanted to find out. The saloon slowly emptied as the night dragged on. Jack remained at the bar, lost in his thoughts. Kimmy had disappeared, and the traders had moved on to other things, oblivious to the spark they had just ignited. But Jack couldn't shake the feeling that he had just encountered something or someone that was about to turn his world upside down. As he finished his drink, Jack made up his mind. He wouldn't just let this moment slip by. There was more to Kimmy than anyone could see, more than just a woman brought into town as a joke. And Jack intended to find out what it was. But more than that, he wanted to know why, in the face of everything he had seen and done. Kimmy's whisper had made his heart race like a wildfire burning deep within him. And so, as the doors to the saloon creaked shut behind him, Jack Callahan stepped out into the night, ready to face whatever lay ahead, ready to face Kimmy and the unknown challenge she represented. He couldn't know what the future held, but one thing was for sure. It would be anything but ordinary. The morning after the strange encounter in the saloon, Jack Callahan woke up to the bright sun shining through the cracks in the wooden blinds. The rooster had crowed at the crack of dawn, and the usual sounds of the town slowly started to wake up. Jack rubbed his eyes and stretched out on the small bed in his room above the saloon. He couldn't shake the memory of Kimmy's words. "I am not a joke, but you might be the one to learn something tonight." Her voice echoed in his mind, and he found himself staring at the ceiling, lost in thought. Jack had been through many things in his life. He had fought in battles, lost friends, and lived through tough times. But Kimmy was different. There was something about her, something fierce and mysterious that made him feel as though he was facing a new kind of challenge, one he didn't fully understand. For the rest of the morning, he tried to focus on his usual tasks, mending his gear, cleaning his horse, and preparing for the day ahead. But every time he thought about Kimmy, the world around him seemed to blur. He couldn't help but feel that she wasn't just a part of some joke. She was something more, and he had a feeling that his life was about to take a turn, one he hadn't seen coming. By mid-afternoon, Jack couldn't stand it anymore. He decided to find Kimmy. He didn't know exactly what he wanted to say to her, but he knew he couldn't just let things go without at least speaking to her again. He made his way toward the stables where he had seen her earlier that morning, and was surprised to find her standing outside, leaning against one of the wooden posts, her eyes fixed on the horizon. She was alone, just like the night before, her calm presence seeming to demand respect even without speaking. Kimmy didn't look at Jack when he approached. She didn't even acknowledge his presence at first. Instead, she continued to gaze into the distance, her expression unreadable. Jack wasn't sure how to break the silence. He had never been good at starting conversations with women, especially not one like her. But the need to understand her, to learn more about her, pushed him forward. "I didn't expect to see you again," Jack said, his voice steady but a little unsure. He felt like he was walking into uncharted territory. Kimmy turned her head slowly to meet his gaze. There was no trace of fear or uncertainty in her eyes. In fact, she looked almost curious, as if she were sizing him up. After a long moment, she finally spoke. "I didn't expect you to come," she said softly. "But you did. Why?" Jack hesitated for a moment, unsure how to answer. He wasn't used to being questioned, especially not about his feelings or his motives. But there was something in Kimmy's voice, something raw and honest, that made him feel like he could tell her the truth, at least part of it. "I don't know," Jack replied. "Something about you. It's different. You're not like the women I'm used to. And last night when you spoke to me, I couldn't stop thinking about it. What you said." Kimmy's expression softened, but her eyes remained sharp, as though she were carefully weighing his words. "You think I'm some kind of mystery, don't you?" she asked, a small smile tugging at the corner of her lips. Jack nodded, feeling both nervous and excited. Maybe, but I also think you're not what they say you are. I don't believe you're just some joke. You're more than that. Kimi straightened up, pushing herself off the wooden post and facing him directly. You don't know anything about me, she said, her voice low but firm. But I'm willing to let you learn, if you're ready for it. Jack felt a flicker of something, excitement perhaps, or maybe fear. But there was no turning back now. He had to know more. He had to understand what Kimi meant by those words and why he couldn't stop thinking about her. I'm ready, Jack said, his voice steady. I want to know who you really are. Kimi nodded slowly. Then come with me, she said. And without another word, she turned and walked toward the outskirts of town. Jack followed her, his heart pounding in his chest. They didn't speak as they walked, the silence between them comfortable but full of anticipation. They made their way out of town, past the dusty roads and into the wide open land. The wind kicked up, carrying the scent of sagebrush and earth. Jack couldn't help but feel a sense of freedom out here, away from the confines of the saloon and the noise of the town. After a while, they reached a small, hidden grove surrounded by tall trees. Kimi stopped and turned to face him, her eyes searching his face. Jack couldn't help but notice the way the light filtered through the trees, casting a golden glow on her skin. She was breathtaking, not just in her beauty, but in her strength. There was something undeniable about her. This is where I come to think, Kimi said, her voice softer now. Away from everyone, away from the noise. Jack nodded, feeling the weight of the moment. He knew this was important, that whatever happened here would change everything. He stood silently, waiting for her to continue. Kimi took a deep breath and looked up at the sky. I wasn't born into the world, you know. I was born in the heart of the plains, among my people. We lived by our own laws, our own ways. But when the settlers came, when they tried to take everything we had, it changed everything. We were forced to adapt, forced to survive, and that's what I've done. Jack listened closely, his heart growing heavier as he understood the weight of her words. He had never known what it was like to fight for survival in such a way, to face constant challenges and threats. He had his struggles, of course, but they were nothing compared to the trials Kimi had lived through. I'm not here for your pity, Kimi added, her eyes fierce. I don't need anyone to feel sorry for me. I'm here because I want to live on my own terms. I want to choose my own path, not be told who I should be. Jack nodded, understanding her words more than he wanted to admit. I get it, he said quietly. But you don't have to do it alone. Kimi looked at him, her eyes narrowing. And why would I trust you? What makes you think I need anyone? Jack paused, considering his words carefully. Because I know what it's like to feel alone. And I know what it's like to want more than just survival. I don't have all the answers, but I know I'd rather face whatever comes next with someone who's strong, like you, than do it alone. For the first time, Kimi's expression softened. She didn't say anything at first, but after a moment she finally spoke. Maybe you're right. But trust isn't something that comes easily. Not for me. Not for anyone who's been through what I've been through. Jack took a step closer. Then let me prove it to you. Let me show you that I'm not like the others. Kimi studied him for a long moment before nodding slowly. Maybe you will, but only time will tell if you're worth trusting. As the sun began to set behind them, casting long shadows across the grove, Jack felt something shift inside him. It was the beginning of something. Something he couldn't fully understand, but something he couldn't ignore. He wasn't sure what the future held, but with Kimi by his side, he was ready to face it. This version expands on the tension and connection between Jack and Kimi, giving more depth to their personalities and motivations. It also brings them closer together as they begin to understand each other. Let me know if you'd like further adjustments.